The Game of Thrones television series is an iconic piece of television history that changed the way we make shows forever. But many fans and critics have identified several moments in the latter seasons that are frequently cited as illogical, inconsistent, or examples of forced plot convenience. These scenes are criticized for breaking the internal logic of the world or undermining established character arcs. Welcome to World of Fantasy. Join me as we take a look at the top 5 most illogical moments in Game of Thrones. Number 5. The Euron Greyjoy Paradox. For 6 seasons, Game of Thrones treated the map of Westeros like a character. If you wanted to travel, you paid for it, in time, in resources, and in survival. But then, there's Euron Greyjoy. Euron famously promised 1,000 ships. Keep in mind, the Iron Islands are effectively a pile of jagged rocks with no timber to speak of. In the early seasons, this would have been a multi-year logistical crisis. In Season 7, it happens in the background, off-screen, and apparently, instantly. But building the fleet is only half the magic. Euron Greyjoy didn't just master shipbuilding, he mastered quantum physics. He exists in a state of narrative superposition. He is everywhere the plot needs him to be at exactly the right time, completely ignoring the tides, the weather, and the thousands of miles of ocean that should have taken him weeks to cross. Then, we have the great dragon blindness. Daenerys Targaryen, flying an apex predator thousands of feet in the air. The ultimate reconnaissance tool is somehow constantly ambushed by a massive, lumbering fleet in the middle of a clear blue ocean. It's not that the fleet is stealthy, it's that the plot has simply hit the off switch on Daenerys' ability to look down. And the cherry on top? The infinite respawn. Euron's fleet suffers catastrophic losses, yet he returns in the next scene with a brand new armada. It's not a war anymore. It's a video game where the villain has infinite resources and the heroes are nerfed by the script. Euron isn't a character. He's a walking plot hole, a testament to a show that stopped asking, how would this happen, and started asking, what looks cool for 10 minutes? Number 4. The Dothraki Resurgence. This was one of the worst on-screen sins ever committed. The Dothraki were built up for seasons as the most terrifying cavalry force in the world. But their arc in the final season is one of the most glaring examples of narrative inconsistency in television history. What was the point of the Dothraki suicide charge? It felt like the dumbest military tactic known to man. During the Battle of Winterfell, we watched the entire Dothraki horde charge blindly into the darkness. Why? Their flaming swords are extinguished almost instantly, and for all intents and purposes, they are wiped off the map. It was a visually stunning, albeit tactically moronic sequence that decimated Daenerys' primary military strength in a matter of seconds. Who came up with that plan? Worse still, Jorah Mormont, a seasoned soldier, led that pointless charge. They threw away their lives without knowing where the enemy was, what weapons they had, or how many of them they were. Soldiers only lead a charge like that when they know all hope is lost and they want to make a final stand and go out in a blaze of glory. But this was how they started the battle. It was almost as if someone had a grudge against the Dothraki and sent them off to die. Daenerys called them blood of her blood, but she just calmly watched them ride off into oblivion without so much as shedding a tear. But then came the magical refresh, 2 episodes later. As Daenerys prepares to attack King's Landing, the Dothraki are back in full force. They are seen standing in rows, looking just as numerous as they were before the Battle of Winterfell. Where did they come from? It was like someone clicked respawn in a video game. The show never acknowledges this. It simply ignores the fact that they were slaughtered, resetting the army count to ensure Daenerys had enough soldiers for the finale. It is a classic Deus Ex Machina. The plot required an army, so abracadabra, the army magically reappeared. Logic be damned. Number 3. The Bells of King's Landing. For years, Game of Thrones relied on subtle cues and complex political maneuvering. By the end, however, the show began relying on simplistic and often contradictory audio-visual shortcuts. For example, the changing lore about the bells of King's Landing. Tyrion insists that if the bells of King's Landing ring, the city has surrendered and the killing should stop. But the show forgets its own history. During the Battle of the Blackwater, the ringing of bells was a signal of alarm and horror, a sound of doom that meant the city was under attack. By suddenly redefining the bells as a surrender signal, the writers created a bizarre, confusing moment that relied on the audience forgetting the show's past lore just to move the plot toward Daenerys' sudden breakdown. This led to another aspect of the end plot that made no sense at all: Daenerys' forced villainy. This entire beat exists solely to justify Daenerys' pivot to burning the city. By having the bells ring and then having her ignore them, the script forces a Mad Queen transformation that lacks the necessary buildup. It ignores her previous tactical restraint and her desire to rule over people, not just ashes. It was a plot-driven event that felt completely disconnected from the nuanced character arc she had experienced over the previous 7 seasons. One might argue that the murder of Missandei and the killing of her dragon Rhaegal enraged her, but for her to turn her fury on all the innocent citizens of King's Landing made no sense. Number 2. Arya's Braavos recovery. In the early seasons, actions had consequences. Ned Stark lost his head for a single political mistake. Robb Stark lost his kingdom for a broken vow. But by season 6, the show began to favor plot armor over the threat of death. Nothing typifies this more than Arya's stabbing. Arya is stabbed multiple times in the gut by the waif, a wound that would be fatal in almost any other context. She then falls into a filthy canal, effectively swimming in sewage with open, deep abdominal wounds. The show treats the laws of infection, shock, and blood loss as mere suggestions, allowing her to survive through sheer, unexplained willpower. This is completely nonsensical, especially in a show where we've been confronted continuously with the direness of bladed conflicts. We've seen that being stabbed in the gut, especially in a medieval context with no emergency medical care, is almost a guaranteed fatality. It is also one of the most excruciatingly painful wounds to receive. Hardened warriors are completely incapacitated by it and die groaning and screaming, but not Arya, because plot armor. As if that wasn't bad enough, the implausible becomes ridiculous in the parkour chase. Not only does Arya survive the stabbing, but she immediately begins parkouring through the streets of Braavos, outrunning a trained assassin who had been hunting her for weeks. The sequence ignores every established rule of human biology and makes the waif, an elite member of the Faceless Men, look hilariously incompetent. It was the moment many fans realized that the grounded tension of the show was dead, replaced by superhero-style invulnerability that stripped the world of its inherent danger. This was really a disservice to Arya's character and everything that had been built up over multiple seasons. It felt like the writers and showrunners had lost a sense of what the show was. The tone was notably different from the gritty realism of earlier seasons. The stabbing incident was one of the major reasons why many fans took a dislike to Arya's journey and arc. Number 1. The coronation of Bran the Broken. And finally, the absolute king of all dumb decisions, the crowning of Bran the Broken in Season 8, Episode 6. Let's set the stage. The Great Council, the most powerful lords and ladies in Westeros, have gathered to decide the fate of the realm. Their singular, holy responsibility was to entrust the kingdom to someone capable, experienced, and worthy enough to stitch a war-torn continent back together. And who do they pick? The kid who spent 3 seasons staring at trees and having visions of other people's lives. Here are the 2 main problems. Firstly, there's a massive logical void. Tyrion's justification is that Bran has the best story. That justification wasn't just weak, it was as crippled as Bran. This is a political system built on power, military alliances, and sharp-edged diplomacy, and you're handing the crown to the guy who literally hasn't held a sword, commanded a battalion, or managed a single castle in his life. Bran had 0 political experience, 0 administrative track record, and essentially 0 life experience beyond being carried around in a basket. It's not just a bad choice, it's a slap in the face to every character who actually clawed their way through the game to stay alive. Secondly, there is the three-eyed raven paradox. Let's talk about the three-eyed raven. For seasons, Bran told everyone he wasn't Bran anymore. He was a detached, mystical entity meant to be the memory of the world, not a bureaucrat in a fancy chair. So, is the three-eyed raven really destined to be the ruler of Westeros? It's a massive tonal clash. One minute he's a cosmic observer, and the next he's accepting a crown he did nothing to earn. And the cherry on top? Sansa just decides the North is independent, and the other lords, who just fought a war over unity, accept it without so much as a complaint. It's a rushed, nonsensical participation trophy ending that threw away 8 years of political buildup just to give us a surprise twist that felt like a bad fan fiction epilogue. So, what's the takeaway? It's a painful reminder that even the greatest stories ever told are only as good as the hands that hold the pen. Game of Thrones proved that when a show runs out of its original source material, it's like a ship losing its anchor in the middle of a storm. The showrunners were suddenly left to fill the gaps, and let's be honest, their decisions never came close to the depth, nuance, or sheer brilliance of the world George R.R. Martin built. The shift was jarring. The tone became cartoonish, the pacing accelerated into a frantic sprint, and the fundamental continuity of character and plot was tossed aside for the sake of checking boxes. Instead of doing the hard work and pursuing the slow, logical building that brought us to the finish line, they chose to sacrifice believability for hollow spectacle and cheap thrills. It's a tragedy, really. We wanted a satisfying conclusion to the greatest epic of our generation, but instead, we got a rushed, flashy ending that valued surprise over substance. It's a lesson for every writer out there. Spectacle fades, but logic is forever. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the Hall of Shame. If you're still hurting from that finale, you're definitely not alone. Let me know in the comments what's the one moment that still makes you scream at your TV. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos like this.